Imagine checking into a hotel that vanishes every night. Where would you go? And could you ever escape? When Emily and her friends arrived, they sought adventure, but instead they found themselves trapped in a maze of dark corridors and eerie whispers. The world outside disappeared, and with it, their hope of returning home. What would you do? It was nearly dusk when Emily and her friends, Matt and Sarah, finally arrived at the Hollow Pines Inn, a remote hotel nestled deep within the mountains. The journey had been long, the road winding and treacherous, but the sight of the grand old hotel was a welcome relief. The inn, with its towering spires and dark wooden facade, exuded a sense of history and mystery, exactly what they were seeking for their weekend getaway. As they stepped inside, the heavy wooden door creaked ominously. The lobby was lavish, filled with antique furniture, ornate rugs, and dimly lit chandeliers. A peculiar sense of unease washed over Emily, but she dismissed it as exhaustion from the trip. Behind the front desk, a tall, gaunt man with piercing eyes and an air of unsettling calm greeted them. Welcome to the Hollow Pines Inn, he said, his voice smooth yet eerily cold. I'm Mr. Graves, the caretaker. I trust your journey was pleasant. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, but Matt broke the tension with a joke about the place being straight out of a horror movie. Mr. Graves didn't smile. Your rooms are ready, he said, handing over the keys. Dinner will be served at 7 o'clock sharp. Don't be late. As they headed upstairs to their rooms, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The hallways were dimly lit, the floorboards creaked with every step, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. But when they reached their rooms, everything seemed perfectly normal, if not a bit dated. Dinner was a quiet affair. Apart from the trio, only two other guests occupied the dining room, a middle aged couple who sat in silence, their faces pale and eyes distant. The food, though rich and well prepared, seemed tasteless to Emily. The oppressive atmosphere of the hotel seemed to dull her senses. After dinner, they retired to the lounge where roaring fire provided some comfort against the chill that had settled in the air. They talked about their plans for the weekend, but the conversation quickly turned to the hotel's strange vibe. Doesn't this place feel off to you? Emily finally asked, unable to contain her unease any longer. Yeah, it's like the set of a horror movie, Sarah replied, nervously glancing around the room. Matt shrugged. Come on, guys. It's just an old hotel in the middle of nowhere. That's what gives it character. But as the night deepened, the unease grew. The wind outside began to howl, rattling the windows, and strange noises echoed through the hallways. Emily tried to sleep but found herself tossing and turning, haunted by unsettling dreams of endless corridors and dark shadows lurking just out of sight. At midnight, she was jolted awake by a loud crash. Heart pounding, she ran to the window, but what she saw outside made her blood run cold. Oh, so the landscape around the hotel had changed. The mountains, the trees, everything was gone. Instead, an endless void of darkness surrounded the hotel, as if it had been plucked from the earth and placed in another world. Guys, wake up! She shouted, bursting into Matt and Sarah's room. Something's wrong! They quickly followed her to the window, their expressions turning from confusion to terror. What the hell is going on? Matt whispered, the friends his voice raced through the hotel, searching for any sign of the other guest or Mr. Graves. But the place was deserted, the once cozy warmth replaced by an oppressive cold. As they reached the lobby, they found the front door wide open, the wind howling through it like a banshee's wail. Outside, there was nothing. No trees, no mountains, just a black void that seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction. The hotel, once grand and imposing, now felt like a fragile bubble in a sea of darkness. This can't be real, Sarah muttered, tears streaming down her face. We have to be dreaming. Dream or not, we need to find a way out, Emily said, and trying to keep her voice steady. But every door they tried led to another room, another hallway, looping back on itself in an impossible maze. The hotel was no longer a place, it was a trap. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Thus, panic set in as they fumbled through the blackness, desperate to find a way out. But the hotel had other plans. In the pitch black, they could hear it, a lower, guttural growl growing louder with each passing second. Emily's heart raced as she realized they weren't alone. Run! Matt shouted. But it was too late. The darkness came alive, swallowing them whole. Emily felt herself falling, spinning, tumbling through the void, her screams echoing in the nothingness. And then silence. When Emily opened her eyes, she was lying on the cold, hard floor of the hotel lobby. Morning light streamed through the windows, and the world outside had returned to normals. The mountains, the trees, everything was back in its place. But something was wrong. The hotel was empty. Matt and Sarah were gone, as if they had never been there. The only sign that they had ever existed was Emily's frantic breathing echoing in the empty hall. She stumbled outside, hoping to find someone, anyone, who could explain what had happened. But there was nothing, just the winding road leading back to civilization. As she walked away from the Hollow Pines Inn, a chilling thought crossed her mind. The hotel had vanished in the night, taking her friends with it. But why had it spared her? And would it come back for her the next night? The answer she feared would come sooner than she wished. Emily drove back to town in a daze, her mind racing with thoughts of what had happened. She tried calling Matt and Sarah's phones, but there was no answer. She even contacted their families, who were distraught and confused, claiming they hadn't heard from them in days. Desperation clawed at Emily's sanity, but she held on, hoping against hope that it had all been some bizarre nightmare. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Days passed, and Emily tried to resume her normal life, but nothing felt normal anymore. She was haunted by visions of the hotel, its dark corridors, and the endless void outside. She avoided sleep as much as possible, fearing what she might see if she closed her eyes. Then, one evening, as she was scrolling through her phone, a news article caught her eye. It was a local story about a young couple who had gone missing after staying at a remote hotel in the mountains. The name of the hotel chilled her to the bone, the Hollow Pines Inn. Her breath caught in her throat. She had to know if the hotel had reappeared. If it had, maybe, just maybe, she could
Emily didn't
find
tell
Matt and
anyone
Sarah
where she
and
was
bring them
going.
back. She simply packed a bag, grabbed her keys, and drove. The road seemed even more treacherous this time, as if the mountains themselves were warning her to turn back. But she couldn't stop. Not now. When she reached the spot where the Hollow Pines Inn should have been, her heart sank. The hotel was there, standing as grand and ominous as ever, as if it had never disappeared. The sight of it filled her with both hope and dread. She parked her car and approached the entrance, her hands trembling. The door was slightly ajar, creaking as she pushed it open. The lobby looked exactly as she remembered it, right down to the eerie silence that filled the air. But something was different. This time, the hotel felt alive, as if it had been waiting for her. Mr. Graves? She called out, her voice echoing through the empty space, but there was no answer. She walked through the halls, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. As she passed by the rooms where they had stayed, she could hear faint whispers behind the doors. She tried opening one, but it was locked. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until she could barely think. Finally, she reached the dining room. The same middle aged couple sat at the table, their faces pale, their eyes vacant. But now there was someone else at the table. Mr. Graves. He looked up as she entered, his piercing gaze meeting hers. A cold smile spread across his lips. I knew you would return, Miss Emily, he said, his voice as smooth as ever. It's rare for someone to leave the inn and come back. Most simply vanish. Where are they? Emily demanded, her voice shaking. Where are Matt and Sarah? Mr. Graves gestured to the empty chairs at the table. They're here with us. They belong to the inn now, just as you will. Emily felt a wave of cold wash over her as she realized what he meant. The hotel wasn't just a place, it was a trap, a prison for souls. And now it was her turn. "Uh, no, oh, she whispered, backing away. I won't stay here. I won't let you take me. But Mr. Graves only smiled. The inn chooses who stays and who goes. You were spared once, but it seems you couldn't resist returning. And now, you belong here forever. The walls round her began to close in, the shadows growing darker, the whispers louder. Emily turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She sprinted down the hallways, trying to find the exit, but the hotel twisted and turned, but that studied thou, the closer that to the leading her in circles. The front door was just ahead, but as she reached out to open it, it vanished before her eyes, replaced by yet another dark hallway. Panic set in as she realized that there was no way out. The hotel had her now. Suddenly, she heard Matt and Sarah's voices, faint but unmistakable, calling her name. She followed the sound, desperate to find them. But the deeper she went, the more the voices seemed to blend with the vicious but Persian diapers until she could no longer tell if they were real or just part of the inn's cruel illusion. Finally, she reached a large ornate door at the end of a long corridor. It was different from the others, carved with strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open. Inside was a grand ballroom, its walls lined with mirrors. In the center of the room stood Matt and Sarah, their faces pale, their eyes vacant. Just like the couple in the dining room, they turned to her, their expressions devoid of recognition. Emily, they said in unison, their voices hollow, stay with us. No, she cried, backing away. This isn't real. You're not real. But as she turned to flee, she found herself surrounded by mirrors, each one reflecting her terrified face. In the reflections, she saw the hotel as it truly was, a decaying, haunted shell filled with the souls it had trapped over the years. And then she saw herself, her own reflection slowly fading away, becoming one with the darkness. The last thing Emily saw before the darkness claimed her was Mr. Graves standing in the doorway, his cold smile the only thing left in the void. And then she was gone. The Hollow Pines Inn stood silent once more, waiting for its next guest to arrive.